Welcome to the Filmmaker's Playbook. My name is Jason Branagan and this is a podcast all about filmmaking. On today's show, I talk to writer and director Phil Hawkins. Some of Phil's credits include his epic Star Wars fan film, Star Wars Origins, Prancer, A Christmas Tale for Universal Studios, and the family action-adventure film Robin and the Hoods for Sky Studios, starring Oscar-nominee Naomie Harris. In our conversation, we talk about how Phil got started in the industry, the making of Star Wars Origins, what exactly is meant by a director's voice, and then we deep dive into the making of his brand new film, Robin and the Hoods, which was released on Sky Cinema on July 26th. We discuss how he prepped, cast his child performers, communicated his vision, and much, much more. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Thank you for listening. Phil Hawkins, thank you very much for joining me. How are you?
I'm good. Excited to be on the show. I've been listening for a while and you've had some great guests with some lovely insights about the industry. So I'm hoping not to disappoint. But yeah.
I don't think you'll disappoint, and I'm very much looking forward to digging into your work and gleaning some of those insights from you. First and foremost, I just want to say congratulations on Robin and the Hoods. It hasn't been released just yet, but I've been lucky enough to get to watch it, and it's a stunning piece of work. So I can't wait for audience to see it when it bells on July 26th on Sky.
July 26th. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. That's very kind. It's like you sort of kind of tunnel vision, try and make something the best you can be, and then suddenly it's kind of out and about and people can see it, and you half forget that people haven't seen it yet because we just had the cast and crew sort of this week, and then the excitement builds to audiences to see it because, I make films to be seen. I make films, for audiences first and foremost, and so it never feels complete until an audience can see and respond to it. Either way, whether it's good or bad, it's all part of it.
I hear you. Look, before we get to Robin and the Hoods, though, I would love to dig into how you got there. And I know that your interest in filmmaking comes from seeing Jurassic Park in the theatre, in the cinema, and what that experience meant to you. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, and subsequently what some of the actions were that you took to begin your journey into becoming a writer and director.
Yeah, I'm wearing my Jurassic Park t-shirt now, which doesn't help the podcast listeners, but I think probably for a lot of filmmakers my age, I was the same age as kind of Tim in the movie, so I very much saw the movie through that kind of young child perspective, and it terrified me. I was absolutely terrified, but on the same flip of the coin, I knew it wasn't real, right? I was watching a movie, and that kind of sort of inner struggle of, wait, who's this Steven guy? What are these names at the end of this thing? Like, people do this as a job? Like, it suddenly just opened up. The world expanded hugely after watching that film, and probably because I'm obsessed with dinosaurs in that film, but I wanted to know everything there was to know about how I had that kind of reaction to it. And that's became the obsession into filmmaking and poring over, and you'll probably know this, there wasn't YouTube, there wasn't the internet to go to. I had an annual for 1993 that had a lot of behind the scenes photos, which I've still got right next to me. And it just blew my mind that a team of people, could create this reaction from an audience, and it just got me into, well, if they can do that, maybe I can do that. And then I started making short films with my mates. Very early on, funny enough, one of the actors in some of my very first short films is in Robin and the Hoods. So that's a long collaboration from being kind of 8, 9, 10 years old. And that's where the bug hit, really. I just kind of became obsessed with trying to make my movies look like the movies I loved watching, and couldn't quite understand why they didn't look the same. But yeah, and I suppose in hindsight, that was my film school, really. I mean, I didn't go to a formal film school. I didn't really study media in any kind of formal way until I was in college. So that would have been, 17, 18. By that point, I'd made so many short films. It was probably crazy. So yeah, the bug just bit, really, all from that film. And the short films are kind of what led into the industry kind of taking notice at such a young age. So yeah, that's all because of that moment. That's sort of why I'm here. It's kind of bizarre.
I love it. So it then really did become a case of getting a camera, making things, and starting to hone your craft and understand what that process looked like over a long period of time. And I'm going to hazard a guess that there was probably some not very good stuff made in that time as well that taught you a lot.
I think you'll find they were all genius. No, they weren't. They all had ambition. I mean, I wasn't just making little kitchen sink dramas, right? I made a Matrix film. I made a hour-long Star Wars movie in my high school where we all dressed up as like cardboard robots and did like a spoof of the Phantom Menace. Like, I was playing with like really early special effects using like Macromedia Flash and anything I could get my hands on. I was really trying to make those movies. Yeah, you watch obviously The Matrix. You see the bullet time. You're like, why can't I do that? What's my version of that? How can I figure this out? And just by doing that, the obsession began. I mean, I remember spending whole holidays frame by frame painting lightsabers onto a shot. Because that's what you had to do, and having a great time doing it, So it was it still is an obsession. Kind of has to be, really, to put up with this industry sometimes. But yeah, it was just the enthusiasm, and I suppose it kept me out of trouble, and it did broaden my horizons, from very kind of early on, because I'm from a single parent family, from a very working class background. Get your tiny violin out. But like they felt movies were escape for me, and maybe I didn't know it at the time, but that's certainly what they were. And I only mention the background is because I know there are a lot of people out there that there's a huge barrier to entry, I think, in terms of that, but also because I didn't know anyone. I had to clean my neighbor's house so I could use her video camera. Like, we can afford a camera, so it was just a kind of roll the sleeves up, get it done kind of situation for the least amount of money possible to make these shorts. So they had ambition, and I think that's what people saw, that kind of story. Also, I was obsessed with the X-Files. Every single episode of that show was like a movie a week. Like, they looked great, they were amazing, different genres, great storytelling. And that became my next obsession, really. So, I made some X-Files stuff. Like, I was just trying to rip off everything I could, find. The irony being I then end up making a Star Wars fan film later in life. But yeah, it was that's where it came from. Probably a familiar story to a lot of filmmakers my age growing up, and the kind of Spielberg effect on their career and lives.
I have to say, though, I love listening to you talk about making some of those films and how ambitious you were trying to be, and the descriptions, as brief as they are, that you gave there just make me feel like making a film like Robin and the Hoods must have been a full circle kind of moment, because it is all of those things in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, Robin and the Hoods it's a very special movie. When first reading that absolutely glorious script, it is the best script I've ever read. Those writers, Stuart and Paul, I mean, we're almost like we were just in sync with the references, with the style, and the opportunity to make a kind of Goonies-esque, action adventure film on a certain scale and budget is a dream come true. Like, I feel very lucky and very blessed to have made that movie. It was very difficult, of course, but I feel very honored to be the guy that was chosen to do it. And I think that is because of the passion for the genre and the passion for those kind of stories, and for that scale and ambition. Like, I was still pulling tricks on that big studio movie with Oscar-nominated actress and like all the bells and whistles of making, a movie like that, still doing grassroots in camera, fun stuff that I probably did when I was a kid. It never goes away. Or I hope it never goes away. That's part of the fun, I suppose.
In terms of the in-between, going from making things yourself and kind of learning your craft to where you are now, you've dabbled in lots of different genres and different types of work, and your voice definitely feels like you are very much at home in the action adventure space of Robin and the Hoods. I was wondering, having dipped in and out of different types of genre filmmaking, did you always know this was where you kind of wanted to be, or did your voice develop over time and you found yourself working in this space?
Yeah, I mean, I think I said earlier, I want to make films for audiences and the biggest audience possible. I still aspire to make movies that are in every single multiplex around the world, regardless of language, country, anything. I think there's a real power to those kind of movies, and unashamedly, I want to make big, huge commercial movies. And that comes with its problems being a British filmmaker and the kind of movies that we make here, which is why Robin the Hoods was kind of so special, because it does feel like a unique kind of film, for the British market, essentially. But yeah, I mean, I just want to make the films that I love watching. And I love unashamedly watching big, huge movies. That's not to say I don't watch the kind of more art house fare or the thought-provoking fare. I find that filmmaking fascinating, but I know that filmmaking isn't me. And I don't want to attempt that kind of filmmaking. I can be inspired by that kind of filmmaking and go, okay, wow, this, captivating character study where not much happens is brilliant as a filmmaker, but I'm never going to be able to make that movie. I mean, I don't know how you even start to make that kind of movie. I need more distractions. I need more fun. But as an audience member, I very much enjoy those, and it does inform and it does inspire how you bring character into kind of more, let's say, enjoyable fare, but you know what I mean? Kind of the films that can be dismissed as, oh, just entertainment. I'm like, yeah, but they're very difficult to make, and the great ones can do it all. They can have character, they can move you, they can make you think, and they can take you for a ride. And I suppose that's the ambition of the kind of film I'm hoping to make in the future. So yeah, I've got this thing about voice, and I hear it a lot, and I don't know what my voice is, and there's probably filmmakers listening to this that fill out those applications that use it as a term to go, oh, tell us what your voice is. It's like, I don't know. I can tell you what I like. Is that my voice? I can tell you why I want to make something. Is that my voice? It's kind of a interesting term people band about to kind of try and pigeonhole people. And as someone that is, doing this currently right now, like things can change on a whim, but I couldn't tell you what my voice is. Someone else probably could, but I just try and make the film. We all engage with scripts and stories in different ways. If you directed Robin and the Hoods, it'd be a different movie, and that'd be really exciting to see, because it would just be different set of challenges, reacting to the problems of filmmaking in different ways, concentrating on different things. It'd be fascinating, very expensive experiment, but a very fascinating experiment to see kind of what your version of that would be like. And I feel like that's what's exciting. I've gone off on a tangent here now, but sorry, viewer, sorry, listeners, this is what happens. But yeah, and so I have tried different genres. My first feature was an adaptation of a Greek tragic play. Sort of, it was like pre-NT Live before there was NT Live. Like that's what technically my first feature was, and I learned loads. And then the next one I made was a romantic drama. Then I made a comedy satire. Then I made a horror. Like, I've really tried to grab every opportunity and grow through that. Whether that's the most successful thing to do, I don't know, but I'd certainly tried to grab every opportunity I had to make stuff.
I don't think there was a tangent there, and I would love to just come back and just to touch on the voice thing, because I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's a horrible question to be asked. I think it is definitely an application question, and I think it's something other people interpret in your work oftentimes that somehow then we are supposed to have previously thought about. I think for myself, I am beginning to become a little bit clearer on what I might call voice, but it has more to do with the things I like to deal with thematically as opposed to stylistically.
Yeah. Like, is it taste? Is it feeling? Is it message? I mean, there's a bunch of different things, I'm looking at now, which a couple of them you go, okay, I get that step. What next? Okay, I made 2 films with a young cast. And okay, you can see a trajectory there to make something bigger in that sort of level. I've also got other things that are so different, but they speak to me in a different way, and that's exciting to be able to do that, and to try and pick things that speak to you instead of dismissing a genre. I mean, I know what I don't like, but sometimes I'm surprised by what I do like in a way. And I suppose it is that self-reflection that makes you look back at a script where you think, wow, why did that speak to me? I have no idea what that is. And that I find that fascinating, really, when coming to kind of choose what to do. It's an interesting thing. I think it's this whole voice thing. Hopefully saying that to make people relax, because you're right. I think it is something that it's easier for people just to tell you what it is rather than for you to articulate what it is. I'd find it hard answering that question, as I said, definitely.
It is difficult. And I think it's difficult, or made more difficult, by the fact that it's going to be ever evolving as you grow as a person and as a filmmaker, and your tastes may change. The things that are important to you may change. And all of those things, I think, will always feed their way back into the work inevitably.
Yeah, I think people say there's cliches of like, they write what you know, and it's like, well, I've never been to space, but it stopped me making a space drama. But maybe the characters are something that I know about, or the backstory of that, or thematically it's something I'm trying to use sci-fi for and all that stuff. But I know that when I think back on films I've made, I know the ones that I like the most are probably the ones that spoke to me the most, or feel like were more my truer self. And funny enough, when I went in and made that crazy fan film, and I very much made that kind of for me, and for the fans, made that for the fan in me rather than it being a selfish exercise. I made something that I thought fans would enjoy. That's the thing that's been the most successful thing in my career, like hands down. Whereas when I've tried to chase the dream a bit, like I made a psychological thriller with Robert Englund a few years ago called The Last Showing, and something I wrote, something that we got raised a decent amount of money for, something that people like. And I mean, I had an email today from a horror YouTube channel that wants to do a Q&A commentary with it. It's found this kind of very small cult like audience, but for me, it wasn't kind of really scary enough to be horror, and wasn't psychological thriller enough to be that, vein of it. So it fell by the wayside. And that's because maybe I was chasing something that I felt like a rites of passage. Like, oh, a lot of people make a horror and that's commercial and that's easy to make, easy to sell, sorry. And therefore, cool, maybe that's what will get me my next step. But because it wasn't really the kind of film I really wanted to make, maybe it fell short in that way. So it's an interesting thing, as you say. It's something that develops, your taste changes, and because at the time it felt so like the right thing to do, and I absolutely loved making the movie. But yeah, it's maybe on reflection, it's about whether that was the right thing to do, or what that led to, and all that kind of stuff.
I love and appreciate that you were able to look at that from that perspective, and with that lens, that reflection kind of lens on, and ask those questions about that particular film as an example as well. I think it's such an important part of the process.
Just to touch on that, I mean, because I quit filmmaking a while ago. Like I did, and I was probably seen as someone that had some success, and I'm doing air quotes. I was probably 5 I think I was 5 feature films in, and it just felt like it wasn't happening. I'd had so many knocks and development hell and like being taken off a project or backstabbed, or like there was so much that happened that I just wasn't a happy person. I was chasing this dream that I've loved since being a kid, and it's all I've known, and it's everything. Like, I don't have a degree, I don't have anything to fall back on. Like, I'm good at nothing other than hopefully half good at this, right? So I just stopped. It was too much, and I feel like, and that's when Origins, the Star Wars fan film, came about after that period of just because I've been fairly successful in commercials and they've been very good to me, and that's mainly how I earn a living, especially making these indie features, which you make hardly anything, or you put the money back into the film, and I thought, oh, maybe that's my lot in life, and that's cool. I can like, hey, I'm directing. This is great. This is it. But there's something about the storyteller in you that keeps nagging away at you, that you don't scratch the itch of like storytelling, and that the dream to make those big movies never really goes away as much as you try and hold it back and try and be realistic about it. And that's how the fan film was born. It was a bit of a reset, really. It was my wife, and full credit to her, who said, please just go and write something that's fun. Just go and write something. Like, you're going crazy right now. And I didn't really understand that I was going crazy, but she's amazing, and and sees me better than I see myself. And then I wrote that crazy short film that if I'd written it knowing I was going to make it, there's no way I would have ended it the way I ended it, with that big ending. But it was just fun, and then it snowballed, and then I got the kind of bug back, and I was like, okay, maybe and I was like that kid again. I was like, but now with toys, and now with like, okay, maybe I can save this money and try and like make this and go to the desert and go on an adventure and shoot this movie, and just, it was very expensive therapy, I suppose, and part, and also a career move. I can't pretend it wasn't like it felt like the last attempt, right? I'm going to make something big and showy and selly, and something that hopefully is going to capture something that may lead me to get that opportunity to have a chat with someone about making that kind of level of film. Because I was sort of done with making those lower budget levels of film. And I understand, as filmmakers listening to this, think, oh, this guy made 5 feature films, now he's complaining. But that growth, that passion, that dream never goes away, right? So how do you chase that, and how do you follow that through? And that's where Origins came from, because because of that slightly kind of troubled or reflective time, in between saying I wasn't going to make any more and then doing that.
Well, for anyone who hasn't watched it, Star Wars Origins is available on YouTube, and probably other places, but they can go and watch it on YouTube, and I'll put a link in the show notes as well. One of the things that struck me and strikes me about that film as a piece as well is it shows your ability to work with scale and make things of an epic nature, but while simultaneously really maintaining this small personal drama within it, which I think is one of the things that can sometimes get lost in epic work. And it's kind of what you touched on a few moments ago, talking about those big blockbusters. When they are done right, you can have all of it. You can have character, you can have theme, you can have message. And in that film, I think it very much showcases your ability to handle and balance all of those things that are quite difficult to balance. I was wondering, would you be willing to talk a little bit about the making of that film? And as you kind of alluded to, that it became like a pivot moment in your career. So it's kind of 2 questions. Could you tell us a little bit about making it and realizing it, and then what the impact of that film was once you did actually release it?
Yeah, it snowballed, really. I think it's because I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I watch a lot of Star Wars fan films, and we all have that, as I say that out loud, we all have this image of what a Star Wars fan film is, right? There's a few which are stunning pieces of filmmaking, like really well done, and a lot of, you know, people figuring out filmmaking, filming their mates, you know, doing lightsaber fights, which is basically what I did. You know, so I don't discourage that. Please go make fan film. That it's amazing. It's a great thing to play in. But I think there was, especially when I was making that film, people kind of heard I was making it. I think the first reaction was like, why? It's like so, you know, a bit kind of stiffy. Like, why are you making a fan film? That's like ridiculous. But I knew that, and thank you for saying that about the story and the moments, because I feel like I had something in that. I feel like it was an interesting take on, and no spoilers, but an interesting take on Star Wars and Indiana Jones. It's kind of a mashup of the two, and a way of kind of making that human and a way of making that connect. That was interesting to me to do that. And the making of it, you know, it snowballed. Originally, I was like, I'm going to shoot in a quarry in Wales and we'll just do some CGI. And then I was like, oh, maybe we can go to Spain and we'll film in some locations that Indiana Jones shot in. And then we just end up in the Sahara Desert, essentially. I know I'm making that sound very simple, but it just snowballed. And I just realized that it is go big or go home, right? Like, why not? Why not go to the desert? Like, why not do this thing? I mean, there's loads of reasons why not. Why not? And it wasn't an easy film to make just from the environment. I mean, most of the crew got sick. You know, we're shooting in literally 50 degrees C heat and on a tiny budget, you know, and I couldn't have done it without the help of a producer called Gary Cowan, a company called Velvet Film that I'd made some commercials with, made a lot of commercials with, because I was producing it myself, I was directing it, a writer, I was trying to do all this stuff. And I was doing too much. Yeah, I had to just I needed someone to come in and help, especially when it got that big. And also, you know, health and safety version of like people in the desert looking after people and stuff. It felt like the responsible thing to do to make sure that I didn't take my eye off the directing ball by wearing too many hats and it all being a bit of a waste of time, you know, because of that. And also just, as I say, making sure people are safe and looked after and that stuff when we have our focused directing brain on. So yeah, I mean, it was an adventure, and it, you know, and I took out a very small crew and we just kind of rolled the sleeves up and with the help of some amazing Moroccan co-producers and the Moroccan army, and you know, it just became this huge thing. Like the unit base of that thing felt like like people thought we were generally shooting Star Wars. So, which was good fun to pretend now and again. So the making of it, and then obviously the visual effects, huge component of it, and a company called Playbook Studio in Manchester, who are big Star Wars fans as well, and they did some incredible work in not very, very little time. But again, I think they wanted to prove they could do it. They wanted to prove that they could do these blockbuster effects without having the opportunity to do that kind of thing in this country. You know, it's kind of, I guess they have done a lot of great work, but no one's asked them to make, spoilers. I'll avoid the spoilers. No one's asked them to do the thing that we did at the end of that film, right? Like it's not just a lightsaber. So I feel that, so then the film came out, we timed it for the release of Rise of Skywalker, the kind of last of the sequel trilogy. And it, from the trailer, it just blew up. I mean, people thought it was a real Disney movie, and some people were really excited by that. Other people were really offended that you know, Disney would mash up Indiana Jones with Star Wars. How dare they? And I you know, there was anxiety up until the release where I thought this is gonna get shut down. We've pushed what is acceptable in fan film probably maybe a little bit too far, because people are now not noticing the difference, which is a great compliment to us and who made it, of course. But yeah, scary that I thought I might get the Disney lawyers on the on the phone at some point. So yeah, it came out. We did, you know, YouTube launch, and the fandom just loved it and embraced it, and that was wonderful for me. And still to this day, I get emails and messages from people some people, like, I've had loads of messages from people saying it connects them back to Star Wars, which is, you can't aim to make that. You can't aim to have that reaction. Like, absolutely not. But I think it somehow captured something in people. And then, and it was all going very well. I sat down with some amazing producers, some of my like heroes, about, so, hey, like, what are we going to make next? And what are you interested in doing? And then COVID hit. And then the world changed. And we all went to lockdown and it all disappeared. That momentum that was like great for like 7 minutes just evaporated. So that was interesting. After spending 3.5 years making that film, the global pandemic was not predicted for any of us. So yeah, that's kind of what brought me back into the fold of the more kind of studio level filmmaking, I suppose.
I think there's a really interesting lesson in lots of that, but one of the things that struck me is the time you took to make it, to make sure it was made correctly, and the patience you need to do that and to see something through and realize it the way you want to, as opposed to the world of tight schedules, get things made, get them out, see whether that builds traction, get on to the next thing. Maybe it was a financial thing, but how did you manage to contain yourself for such a long period of time in making that film and to maintain a level of patience to ensure you were making it exactly the way you wanted to?
I mean, it was mainly financial, really. Like, I just had to save up. Yeah. I mean, I spent basically our life savings on the film. And I went into overdrive in commercials to try and make as much money as I could to put into it. Like, it gave me a focus. Even then I needed more help, to make the film. And that's when Velvet came along, really helped from support and from a financial perspective, because it wouldn't have been made on that level, and Flipbook, of course, without their very generous help and also their belief in what I was trying to do, which, is very touching, actually, for someone to have that kind of belief in you, and you say, look, it's a fan film, you can't make any money from this, there's no way we're going to make money from this, I can't sell it, we can't make money back, I can't sell a t-shirt, I can't do anything, right? You're just throwing money into the wind because we're going on this adventure together. And hopefully it can lead to other things, because we're doing something I think is hopefully kind of big or special enough or showy enough or crazy enough that maybe it'll get some attention. And that's hopefully what we capitalize in. That's the benefit of making it. But then it did allow the time to then really think about it. And I prevised pretty much everything. I learned a previs bit of software because I had the time to do it. And every single bit of the film was prevised. And it's on YouTube. There you can. I've done the kind of first previs of the whole film and then pull it against the finished film to see, unedited, to see where it syncs and where it doesn't, and what's the same, what's different. And it's kind of an interesting exercise to kind of see what worked and what went wrong and what changed. And so that's available if people want to see it. But again, it helped the vision, right? I could show people exactly what I wanted, because, we had, a very good amount of money to make a short film, but we definitely didn't have enough money to shoot a action adventure Indiana Jones film in the Sahara Desert. Like, absolutely no way. Some of those shots that are like the biggest shots of the movie, we had to get in 10 minutes because sun or weather or heat or the actor was ill, or, it was all that on top of it. So it was by the skin of our teeth that we made it to the level it, ended up being. So yeah, very, obviously very proud of what we achieved on that, and very happy with the movie and, and the response to it.
For any filmmakers who are contemplating making a fan film, what's your top tip?
My top tip is, it depends on who you make the fan film for. Don't make this like into a big fan film exercise, but like, if you're making a Star Wars fan film, please don't quote me on this, but you're kind of relatively safe as long as you're making a film that's not disparaging to the brand, that isn't like R-rated, that isn't, you're not selling T-shirts or trying to make money from or anything like that, you're generally currently sort of left alone. Try and make a Star Trek film, you'd be shut down in 7 seconds. Because, you know, different studios have different patience with fan film. And if you really want to go deep into the whole what is fair use of IP and what is considered that as legal, if you look at Joseph Kahn's Power Rangers, R-rated Power Rangers fan film, which is insane and definitely very different to the brand, that got a lot of heat. And, you know, and there was whole fights and an interesting discussion about what is considered fair use in fan filmmaking. So that's all out there to kind of read and see. I mean, you've kind of got to go in knowing that this could end at any second. And if you're kind of comfortable with that, I mean, I was really that comfortable with it. But if you're crazy enough to carry on, then why not? Like, it's a great way to learn filmmaking and try and copy things you've seen and try and use techniques that you know Hollywood has access to, and your version of that, you know, it makes you a better filmmaker.
Brilliant, thank you. So I don't want to necessarily just rush past your first studio feature, Prancer: A Christmas Tale, but let's jump to Robin and the Hoods, and I think we can come back to Prancer when we talk about Darcy and some of the past. But earlier you mentioned that when you first read the script for Robin and the Hoods, it was one of, if not the best script you have read. So I would love to get a sense of your initial instincts when that script crossed your table.
Well, I mean, it was the best script. It just, yeah, and unfortunately, it does a disservice to scripts that come through now. You know, with a different lens. It just captured something in me, the child in me, the filmmaker in me, the audience member in me. Like this idea of, and if you haven't seen the trailer or anything about the film, essentially the film is 2 different movies. It's a film that fully commits to the imagination of the kids. So they enter this kind of bit of wood at the end of their road, and when they enter it, it becomes like a medieval kingdom. Like their swords, their sticks become real swords, their bikes become real horses, their cardboard armor becomes real beautiful armor. Like we fully commit to that world the same way that kids do. You know, you put a cardboard box on your head and pretend you're an astronaut, you're in space. Like that is make-believe, that is the power of imagination. And then it's also a kind of modern day suburban kind of British, you know, drama about a kid that is coming to terms with that tricky transition between primary school and high school, and the pressure to grow up and the pressure to stop believing in these things and stop playing as much. And this especially these days, this pressure to grow up too quickly, which we necessarily didn't have when we're younger. So this was all on the page, right? So giving this to a filmmaker to go, well, here's the challenge. How do you do horses and fantasy and battles and everything, and also balance the you know, the beautiful drama and these lovely quiet scenes with, you know, daughter and father and these sorts of things in the same movie? And as much as the inspiration for that on the page, the choice of when that should happen or how that should happen was not on the page. And that was very much up to the director's interpretation, probably more than any film I've ever read, where it was like, wow. And this was saying earlier about if you got that script, your interpretation of what that is could be very different. And that was my whole pitch really to the producers, was this isn't some kind of Monty Python-esque, I mean, obviously Monty Python comedy gold, but in terms of production value and budget, it's no Gladiator. So I was more akin to, how do we try and use the iconography of Ridley Scott, you know, movies or Braveheart or Game of Thrones? How can we give the modern day audience what I believe they will expect from this movie, but with kids, which is a really interesting, for me, an interesting spin on how, you know, on how that happens and how you do that. So that whole idea of committing to it fully was my number one pitch of how I, probably got the job, really. I think it was the commitment and the passion for doing it that way. And I'd made commercials in a similar vein, kind of a bit of a Game of Thrones parody stuff. I'd made in my, previous features, Life Before Origins, I'd made a very low budget, kind of Game of Thrones-esque, fantasy drama. So, I had that in my kind of my locker. And then I had Origins, for the kind of scale and ambition of it. So I think all that spoke to this being the perfect script at the right time, the kind of lightning in the bottle, I suppose. And it felt like that when I was reading it. I felt like I'm going to be gutted if I don't get this film. And there's always that bit in you that goes, there's obviously way more important and better and more experienced people than me reading this. Every time I think that, something in me doesn't step back from it. I kind of lean in. I go, right, well, then how can I, if I'm pitching against X, Y, Z, and you don't know it, but I always assume it's obviously someone better and more experienced and has better ideas than me. How can I beat that? How can I make sure I'm understood and heard in that kind of initial meeting? And I really wanted it. I really wanted it.
That's a great mindset and a great way of approaching that process. I would love to maybe just dig a little deeper on the pitching process and the tools you use to sell your vision and to sell yourself and convince the team that you were right for it. Before we do that, just in terms of connection kind of to the material as well, the idea of living in the imagination, I love it. It's just such a beautiful place to exist in. And I'm not sure whether kids now have the same experiences that we had at a particular age, but there was something so familiar in the film to me about the kingdom, even though that wasn't my childhood. I think everyone probably remembers the idea of there being some woods at the end of the street or just open space, and you had a base, and it was probably a couple of pallets and some tarp, and people went and just hung out and did nothing, and you're just kids. And the film, for me anyway, really captured something that I could relate to as an adult and as a child, which is difficult, I think, for films to do all of the time. That is just a digression, really.
No, it's lovely to hear, because we're talking about a film whose lead is the character's 11 years old and it's a bunch of kids. Like, I feel the movie is more than that. I think it can be dismissed quite easily as like, oh, it's some kids doing a Robin Hood, and that's not what I was wanting to make, or I believe we have made. And there is a huge distinction between a movie for kids and a movie for families. And sometimes either people don't understand that, they don't understand the audience, or they're kind of lumped together as the same sort of thing. And as a parent, I know the movies I enjoy watching with my kids, which feel like they're for me as much as they are for them, and the movies that they watch and I, stare at something in middle distance as it happens. And we've all had that. We've all experienced that. So in this film, and again, it was in the script, it was there, like, it spoke to me as an adult and as a big kid. And I feel that we all have that. And we all, as you say, we all have a memory or a place or a thing, that we remember from being kids, that hopefully this can, in terms of the sort of power of nostalgia, can access for us and make us as adults connect with it as much as the kids. Because for the kids, it's wish fulfillment, right? I saw it on set. I saw it. I knew this was going to work for them, because as soon as these 50 kids in armor came on set, and I gave them all axes and swords and said, right, run, and there's horses and all this stuff like this, they just had the best time ever. Like, they were just having an absolute ball, doing it, because it was fulfilling the thing that, that it's fulfilling play, it's fulfilling imagination, is that I say, that wish fulfillment. So they see the film differently. They see a film that commits to their viewpoint, but for adults, it's a film that makes us reflect on our child or our viewpoint, I suppose. Again, that's the page. That's really what I saw, what the power of this script and this film could be about, which could elevate it beyond, usual kind of family fare or kids fare, essentially.
I love the distinction you made between family film and kids film. And it's not one I've heard anyone make before, but I think it's a very important distinction. So thank you for that, because I was asked a question about something I was pitching recently, and that would have been a great answer to have, but I didn't.
Go back. So, by the way, I've just thought in an email, I had it on Prancer, the film I did for this was for Universal, and that was a script that needed work, by their own admission. Like, it needed someone to grab it and help the writer and the production guide the kind of movie it was going to be. And my whole pitch to that, quite nerve-wrackingly, because it was my very first studio pitch with a bunch of American producers, and he's now become a dear friend, but Raffaele, De Laurentiis, he's like a legendary producer, like June, God, like made so many amazing movies. Looking at me, for my little answers over Zoom. And I made the distinction then. I said, look, I don't think this script is childish enough to be for kids. I don't think there's enough like reindeer or hijinks to keep kids interested. And I don't think there's enough drama to keep family interested and adults interested. So what are we making? Especially for a Christmas movie, which can deal with all that. And a big dollop of sentimentality, a big dollop of everything, and we get away with it more in a Christmas movie than any other. Why are we not doing that? And that's what the process of that was. And using, in terms of, you talked about pitching, using a pitch, that's what it is about. It's like, how do I speak the material? How directorially do I see the story going? And what do I feel it needs to change in the script to kind of meet that vision, to meet that, my perspective on it. But in Robin and the Hoods, I didn't have that. I think I opened the Zoom call saying, right, so when do we shoot this thing? It's ready, which everyone just kind of smiled and laughed at, because I think they kind of knew they had a good script. I think it takes someone outside of that to kind of, an external viewpoint to do that. And I guess it's very easy to kind of try and criticize and come up with stuff just to sound clever. But now it's like, genuinely, I'd shoot this tomorrow if you asked me to. So then the conversation was, but this is then how I would shoot it. So it wasn't really from a story development. I mean, we changed some stuff, but it wasn't. The main thing we did was beef the aura character, the kind of witch aura character, because I feel like I really wanted to understand this, hippie in the woods, and I felt there was a bit more that could be mined from that. Sort of, that's it, really. So the whole pitch was, this image from Game of Thrones and Gladiator, which I know cost millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars, is what I think this film deserves, versus this, which I don't think the movie is. And the way to combine the two is to do transitions like this. And I pulled loads of transitions from different movies and commercials and stuff, and cut a little reel together of interesting devices that I felt spoke to this style of movie, so they could picture and visualize what I was going on about when I was talking about wipes and invisible cuts and match cuts and all this kind of stuff. And they could watch something that hopefully helped them get into my brain a little, which is our job, effectively. So yeah, it was a visual deck, which they weren't expecting. They weren't expecting that level, and I think that again helped. I said earlier about lean in. It's like, right, what is the most I can do to make sure that my ideas are being communicated in the right way? And it could have been a swing and a miss, absolutely, like 100%. But you've got to swing, right? You can't play it safe in these things. People want a strong voice. Oh, I've said the word voice. Maybe that's what we mean. People want a strong opinion and a guided hand. That's our jobs, I feel. That's my job, I feel, is to do that. And hopefully it connects to the people making it.
I'm really interested. I had a question. I was going to ask it at a different point when we were talking about production, but as you mentioned them, I would love to pick your brains on those transitions. Because as I watched the film, many things stood out to me, but one of them was going from the imagination into the real world and how seamless all of those moments were. And I was curious about how much previs you did for those moments. It felt to me like there was no margin for error. You had to know where those cuts were and
Yeah.
when they were and why they were. And I was wondering whether they were written into the script as this is the moment it cuts, or whether that was something that when you came on board and you start to figure out how we marry these two movies almost visually, whether that was something you kind of really led.
It was a bit of both, really. So the script had certain moments. The script, it's quite hard to remember now because I'm so used to the shooting script, which we'll get into because I think that's where it all really came together. But in the original script, it definitely had description of like the sticks are now swords and blah blah, and this is it, and it was more kind of not generic. That'd be doing a disservice, but it wasn't so precise. You know, it didn't have that precision, which quite right you talked about. Like they had to. There was no margin for error. There are obviously moments from the story perspective of when reality and fantasy happened as storytelling for the writers to use those moments for what they're trying to say in the scene. I think definitely what changed the most in the script were those moments, because I was very clear to everyone that every single time we do it needs to be for a reason and needs to be done in a way that is so precise that it feels effortless. And that all had to go in the script, because you think, and the shooting script became quite complicated because every scene number had a letter code. So you'd probably have like 32R, and that was reality, and 32F, which was fantasy, right? So heads of departments would go, okay, this is a reality scene. You know, these are the reality costumes. This is a fantasy scene. This is the fantasy costume. But then within a scene, it might change 3 times. So you'd have 32 part 1R, then 32 part 2F, and 32 part 3R within the, and they're all shot at different times, right? You might shoot the reality pieces together, or you might shoot them totally differently depending on what was needed for the scene, because purely because of costume. Like if anyone's done this kind of stuff, they know these costumes take ages to put on, to take off, to look after, to maintain, and you know, this armor and everything like that. So no scene was really shot at the same time. And I think there's a really early question, which is a very valid question, you know, from a production standpoint. It's like, so do we just shoot everything twice? You know, do we just shoot, you know, we're just going to shoot reality and then shoot fantasy and we'll decide later? And like, no. Firstly, we don't have the time. Like, you know, if you give me 100 days, we could maybe do that. But also, that's not the film. You can't just cut to fantasy. You can't just cut to reality. Every single change needs to be for effect and for a reason. So that's what the script became, was we became very prescribed about when the moments happened and why the moments happened. So in the mechanics of, you know, down all the departments and the crew and everything, people knew what they were doing that day, because you can imagine how complicated that can become to put together, which I hope when you watch the film, it doesn't feel complicated at all. But it's only when you peel back the layers a little bit and go, wait, okay, so that needs horses, but now we're on bikes. And then also Medipi and I, you know, we want to have 2 different looks for reality and fantasy. So we used anamorphics for fantasy and master primes for reality, which is great. And again, the camera team can look at the script and go, okay, this is an R scene. Great, let's get the master primes out. But when the transitions happen, there's a massive difference in focal lengths between a prime and an anamorphic. So then we had to map the lenses and know what a match to, say, the 50 on a master prime was to the anamorphic. So those moments where, well, there's one in the trailer from when the horses become bikes, which seems so seamless. Like there's a lot of thought that's gone into what lens we're on and the height difference between the horses to the bikes, and do the horses have to be much further back, and optically is that going to feel strange when we wipe into a different lens set and also a different size of thing in the frame? That's the stuff that came me up at night, because there was no time to test it. It was just purely on instinct, and some stuff worked great, and some stuff you on the day you're just like, oh my god, this is guys, we need to rebuild the track like 12 feet back. I'm sorry, but that's what we need to do to kind of get that matching as much as humanly possible. So yeah, a lot of thought went into every single transition, and there isn't really a happy accident transition in there. Like, everything was considered for all departments' sake.
I have to say, from watching it, that all tracks, it must have been difficult to just manage and stay on top of for everyone, but absolutely feels seamless, effortless, easy to watch and a joy to watch.
Thank you.
Very intentional as well. You could tell how carefully chosen each of those moments were, and I think the impact of them and why they were happening when they were happening. So
audiences are smart, right? Visually as well. Like, it's just, so there's a lot of setup. You know, there's a lot of transitions in the first 15 minutes of the movie, partly because that's fun, because we're in the battle and it's this big battle and stuff, and we can use that for humor and comedy, but it's also it's an education for the audience to understand the kind of film they're in. And then later on, some of the transitions just become cuts. Like, they just generally are a cut between one and the other. I can imagine if you saw that in isolation, you go, wait, what just happened? But in the language of the film, you understand, or hopefully you start to understand or feel why we've done what we did. I mean, there's quite a pivotal one where there's probably the lowest point of the characters, and it feels like, you know, play is far away from these kids now. Like playtime is over kind of thing. And I just do a really hard cut from reality to fantasy, some fantasy to reality, and the scene carries on. And you would imagine that's so jarring, but actually it informs the emotion. It forms how they're feeling. Like, they're not in this game anymore, so why should they be? And it changes so quickly, and it's in mid-scene. And again, in the shooting script, you read it, you go, this feels weird to have a scene break here. You know, this, like, what? And so that was an interesting thing to try and keep track of, especially because the actors are so young, right? And some of them never done a movie before, so it's quite a complicated thing for them to get their head. Well, actually, I say that they totally got it. I mean, they're smart kids. It was maybe more us dinosaurs making the film that needed more help with what was going on.
One of the things I loved as I watched as well was it just looks like it was so much fun to make, but also so much fun to prep. You mentioned a couple of films and TV series as references. Some of the things I picked up on, I thought I saw Braveheart, Lord of the Rings, very funny Lord of the Rings reference.
Definitely one for the grown-ups, definitely.
Gladiator, I think Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, Goonies, as you had mentioned, and it's all in a really subtle homage, fun way. And I was curious about, when you then were booked for that gig, how did you begin the process of prep, or how do you like to prep? Do you immerse yourself in comp or reference kind of films and start kind of just exploring and seeing, well, what have people done? How can I push that? Or do you prefer to not watch things? And then by proxy of that, I suppose, how do you then begin to translate what you're seeing in your head and communicate that with all of the different departments who need to see what you're seeing?
Yeah, so I'm glad you spotted those references and stuff. I mean, the movies I love. I said earlier that unashamedly, I just love these kinds of movies. So funny enough, it was almost the reality sections of this film are harder to make in a way, because it's fairly easy to make people in armor on horses, backlit with some smoke, running through a forest look epic, right? It's like, it's not that difficult, really, in the grand scheme of things. But then how do you balance that with an intimate scene with a father and a daughter in a bedroom, in a very domestic environment, in a very small room and a real location? You know, it's kind of, that's the stuff that made me a head scratcher. Really, really wanted to make sure that stuff felt big enough that it didn't, I know I said earlier, it feels like two movies, but I still wanted them to be like cohesive. Like, still want to speak to each other. So I did put a lot of thought into the reality sections of it. I mean, going back, like, yes, I mean, there's some reference in there that you could point out and go, is that from Prince of Thieves? And I'll go, oh, do you know, it probably is. And I've not noticed. There's other stuff where I studied every single Game of Thrones battle. And I've watched Braveheart, I don't know how many times. I watched Gladiator, I don't know how many times. And I was leaning in with my DP to go, right, see this image? This feels very Braveheart to me. Why? You know, what is it about this image? It's like, okay, kid, yeah, there's someone on a horse, it's backlit or low angle, doing a speech, and we're tracking through foreground and flags and things. That's what says Braveheart. And we're like, yeah, we agree. Well, we've got to do that. But what makes us different is actually a kid on a horse talking about skate parks and not talking about, you know. So there's a humor and hopefully a charm that comes. I said earlier, like that imagery is to do two different things. It's inviting adults into this world, knowing that, wow, like they're actually doing a proper battle with kids and people getting hit by arrows. What is this movie? I'm kind of in. This is cool. And also kids being heroic and like the center of a movie and strong and powerful characters kind of represented on screen. Like, it's doing a lot. And then, so in order to do that, in every movie I do basically what's called a visual Bible. I'm a huge prepper, like an insane prepper. And my visual Bible for this is probably 80 pages, I think 76 pages long. And it was everything. It was like a brain dump. It was like, our film is this, it's not this. I love these kinds of costumes. I think this kind of color. I think the HUDs need to be wearing these kind of earthy tones. And I think the knights need to contrast this with these bluer, cooler metallic tones, you know, and then images from the Goonies. And like, why is the Goonies so fun and watchable? Why the kids' performances, you know, stand the test of time and aren't kind of saccharine and staged and that stuff? Because it's wide frames with lots of faces and kids allowed to be kids and that kind of Spielbergian, you know, continuing master feel, which I did, you know, a bunch of in the film. And it's all a big brain dump and everyone gets it. You know, whoever you want to be, if you want to know what kind of movie you're getting yourself in for, what we're aspiring to make, it's that document. And it becomes a thing that HODs and anyone really, like, they'll flick through. And because I know there's certain like costume things that I feel like I've not had that conversation. And then the first time I see the costume design, that thing that I really liked is already there. It's because they've studied this stuff and go, okay, well, I don't have to ask him this question about the type of hat because he's already chosen 3 hats, you know. So it becomes a way of trying to be as unfiltered as possible. And I don't have all the answers, and it has to be exactly this, but it's like, this is what we're aiming for. And please help me get there, because I have no idea how you're going to do that thing, but this is what I'm trying to do. And then that also informs the shot listing and blocking plans. I'm paperless on set. I literally have my trusty iPad mini in my pocket. We can nerd out on apps. We're not sponsored, but I'm sure it's happy to be sponsored. I use Evernote and Shot Lister and Hollywood Shot Designer. And I pull all these together in Evernote. And basically, it's a shareable notebook where every scene has a page. So you can type a scene number, and it'll give you the shot list. It'll give you the blocking plan. It'll even give you some of my own notes about theme or like wants and needs of characters. Like, I'm very open, you know, to people reading that if they want to read it. Helps scheduling. It helps production. It helps everyone, you know, not have to pick up the phone to me and go, Phil, like, how many shots are you thinking for this? Not that I don't want to have that conversation, but sometimes at 2 a.m. you're like, oh, I need an answer for this, and it's there for most of it. So if that becomes a bit of an obsession, and I did some very late nights on Robin because it was changing a lot in the prep, to re-update that and keep on top of that, because that's my brain. I feel like I'm, you know, don't have the best like memory to contain all of this at any one time, and I need my own reminders, and this is my way of going into that scene. And sometimes I'll just drag a photo in it and I'll go, oh yeah, okay, cool, that's the vibe. I remember what I was thinking when I did that. Or And so it becomes this, it's like a note to self, but it's a shareable note to everyone. And I'm very happy for people to read it because I don't really have anything to hide, even in the stuff where I'm like, I don't know, question mark, need to speak to stunts. Like it's all there, you know? So I feel like that is the best way for me. I feel like I've refined it more, but I've pretty much done that in every movie and no one's complained about it yet. Everyone's seen it as an asset, I think. So yeah, that's my process. And it is a lot of work and it takes a stupid amount of time, but I suppose it's how I get to intimately know the script and really, really kind of, to be a cliche, like prepare for battle. Like I feel like I've thought of everything I can until the unexpected happens and then you pivot. But at least there's a plan. And I've fully realized plan, especially on a film as ambitious as this. You know, it's 30 days in total, but some of the battles are shot in, I think all the battles are shot in like 3 days, maybe 4 days. And that includes some other stuff later on in the film. And it's just, which isn't a lot. It really isn't a lot, especially you consider kids' working hours and the logistics of all that and the school involved and the tutoring. And it's, you have to have a plan. Like you have to be willing to throw it out. I know a lot of directors say this. I've heard it on the show, but you can't not go in with a plan. Like I just don't know how you can on this sort of time. Absolutely.
I think that's brilliant. So Evernote, Shot Lister, and there was one other.
Hollywood camera work, I think it's called. Hollywood camera work? Yeah, it's a way of doing blocking plans, essentially. Hollywood shot designer, sorry. A way of doing blocking plans really simply, really easily, so everyone knows what's going on.
I might pick your brain on some of them offline.
Please do. Please do. And I get not to plug my YouTube channel, but on Prancer, I did some complicated one-ers and I put together a video that's got like my blocking plan, my shot list, the finished film and notes and stuff. So you can kind of see, and it's from my Evernote, so you can kind of see how that all comes together on the floor. So, but yeah, we can have a chat, of course.
Yeah, well, I love it as a means of communication and being confident enough to share all that information, all of your notes, because it's the one thing that directors are always being pulled in so many directions if people don't have the information that they need to do their jobs. So a streamlined way of providing as much of that information in one central location that people can access, I think can only, I would imagine, buy you more time to focus on the things you want to be focused on and prepping those things. As you said, if someone can just pull up a scene number and find an answer without having to pull you into another meeting.
Absolutely. And especially just on set and knowing how we're doing with the day and like which direction we're facing in and all this stuff, like it's all there, you know, especially in something like this, which when you're scouting for locations, like a lot of it's shot in woods, but I was, you know, obsessed with, it's not just any wood, right? The woods have to have a certain feel, because if not, I was shooting the same bit of wood and pointing the camera and it's all green. Like no one tree is the same. I was always looking for landmarks or kind of sort of, you know, natural like architectural differences between that bit of woodland and this bit of woodland. So the audience knew we're in different places and all of that was, again, a cheat sheet of with like what 3 words of where we were stood when I took the picture. So when people went scouting or people were trying to get ahead and find stuff, because a lot of making movies with kids is like pre-lighting the location ahead, because some of these days we had massive moves throughout like woods from one scene to the other and trying to get ahead, and people were able to go, oh, where's that? Oh, it's on my phone. Oh, the what 3? Okay, it's that. Oh yeah, it's here. This is the angle he's gonna film at. Okay, cool. And then you just get ahead of yourself like all the time. And you know, things obviously change, like, or you're inspired on the day, and you're in your right with the time that you have to kind of change things. And sometimes you have to change things. Sometimes you have to kill your darlings because of time, and you come up with a more efficient way or a better way. Or I always overshot list, you know. I always do. I always, like, even now, like making some movies and go, right, I know I can be on that camera and if I push in, it'll become this shot. So I don't need a thing, but I'll still sort of list it as another shot. So I make sure I know I've got it. But I know that I'm combining 1, 3, and 7 on the shot list in the same shot. But I sort of have to speak it out for my own process to know that it's there, because, God forbid you forget and miss something when you could have got it. Like that's the worry, right? That's the worry.
You mentioned time. In terms of time, I was amazed when I saw your schedule in the production notes was 29 days, or as you said, 30 days. And I intentionally didn't look at the production notes before watching the film because I didn't want anything in there to color what I was going to watch. And my wife asked me, how long do you think it took to film it? And my estimate was at least double what you had.
Yeah.
I would love to get a sense of the scheduling of the film, because as you have described it, there's these two worlds in the film.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned the time it takes to get in and out of costume, and you have lots of kids in full armor. So I would imagine you are obviously shooting all of that fantasy stuff, kind of block shooting as much of that as you can, then coming back and doing the real world side of things. But how did you go about really interrogating your schedule and making sure you could achieve what you were setting out to achieve in 30 days, just 6 weeks? It's crazy.
Well, it's always given. So I didn't really have any say in whether I could have another 5 days or a day, or it's like, no, this is what you've got. How you divvy that up, speak to the first AD, but like that's basically what you do. And it's not an easy kind of equation. You can't just divide the page count by 30 and go, okay, cool, there's your page count, because some days in the battle they're shooting 3/8 in a day, which that is insane on a 30-day schedule. Like, it's insane. Like, like the people, like, I'm sure there was conversations going on behind my back, with the producer of the Bond company going, why did he shot 3/8 today? Like, what is going on? Like, you do, and he's like, no, like, this is the battle, and this is how long it takes, and this is what it's going to be. And if you look ahead in the schedule, so when it got to the the mayor scenes in the town hall, some of those are 7, 8, 9 page days. Maybe not 9, but like 7 or 8 page days, still with kids, and also with Naomie and Matt and Mark, and and two handlers with them and stuff. There was a lot to shoot, and we only shot in that town hall for 2 days, including Robin Darcy's big speech he does and stuff like that. Like, there's certain scenes where you're like, I can't rush this. It's really important. And it also happened to the days where there's absolute torrential rain, and our marketplace set outside basically was like washed and blown away, essentially. So things had to change in that way. I digress. But it's a case of seeing what's important and going into that original vision of committing to the imagination of these kids and that style of it. I knew I need to maximize the amount of, try and get as much time as I could in the fantasy, especially in the opening battle, especially that stuff like that, to reset the film up, to really set up the rules of this game, and to make sure people care about it, to make sure the audience knows how much the characters care about this game they're playing. And so when it comes to defend it later, we understand how important it is to them. So it's kind of trying to do that in an unrestricted way. But it's at a cost, because then you end up with days where you're like, I just need to shoot this as quickly as humanly possible in a way that is hoovers through these pages. Hopefully still in an interesting way, but here we go. This is the day now. And you go in with your eyes open, sometimes kicking yourself on that day when you've got all this amazing battle stuff, and the next day you're feeling the pain and the pressure, and in order to meet the day, because you've spent so much time doing that other stuff. So it's a very hard thing to give probably advice on that translates, I suppose, to across productions. But I feel like as a director, you have a responsibility to the audience. You're trying to protect. I'm trying to protect that at all times. And so when it looked to the schedule, I was like, I am willing to come up with an interesting way of shooting this 3 pages that's efficient and still quite cool, so I can spend that time on the battle. I was always trying to get as much time in the battle as possible. But then there's other variables of, well, you've only got a certain amount of horse days, and there's only a certain amount of days where you can have all these extras on set at one time. You know, and because of the costume and the makeup and the tutorers and the chaperones and everything, the budget snowballs as soon as you get these big days. So it's a constant back and forward between, wow, we just made another half a day that we can spend on battle, but we can't afford that half a day. So, and actually, script changes. So there's a point in the film later on, trying not to go spoilers, where Glenn the Wizard does something to show everyone the kind of world that they might live in. And it's cool and cinematic and kind of one of my favorite moments, but that wasn't in the original script. The original script had a very cool, like Lord of the Rings style montage of them like riding horses, you know, over vistas and stuff. And then, you know, then fun transitions of they're going through a streaming river, and then you cut and it's actually just a puddle in a car park, and you know, all that stuff. And they were great gags, but my God, like, we don't have time to film that. Like, there's no way. Oh, and the money to have these horses at all these different locations and stuff. So we had to cut that straight away and come up with a new way to tell the story that worked in that same location. So, you know, the writers and I came up with that, and it again, it helped inform characters, because it became about Glenn having some ownership and having his moment in the movie, which maybe wasn't necessarily there before, because actually it was Robin and Henry going on this journey together. So we're like, tick, we just saved those days, add them to the battle. So it was very much that. But then in the battle, I remember doing the tech recce and explaining, and you know, my stunt team and horse team, they were on Gladiator 2, they've been on big thing, they've been on Game of Thrones, they've done these big shows. And here's little old me going, okay, so all the kids are going in this thing, and then they're on horseback, and then they run and they charge and they hit the barricade, and then they fight, and the barrier gets pulled away by a horse, and then they all rush out, and then there's a field, and everyone's like, this guy is insane. You just described 3 weeks of shooting. And I was like, okay, I know that sounds a lot, but this is how we're going to do it. And the way we're going to do it is to do it in oneers. So we're not distracted, both in terms of resources, screen time, and just general coverage. Not distracted by, you know, the Ridley Scott thing of stick 7 cameras on it and stage something epic and get some amazing stuff. Like, we can't do that. So the style of the film in terms of transitions and stuff informed the approach of how to make it. So that's why I was very excited by doing kind of these cool one as the transition from reality to fantasy, hopefully in kind of a seamless way within a battle. My homage to, you know, Jon Snow and Battle of the Bastards and Game of Thrones and that kind of stuff. So when you start to explain, I know that sounds a lot, but actually it's in 5 pieces. And today we're only doing 3 of those pieces, because this afternoon or tomorrow we're going to do the reality pieces of 2 pieces, and that's it. There's no other coverage. There's no other thing. That's the scene, and we just need to make sure that works, because there's no other way of cutting around it. So it started to help, really, the style of it, especially with, I love moving masters. And like one of my favorite scenes in the movie is like a low angle shot that rotates around the kids as they huddle together and make a plan. And it's literally a shot that rotates one way and then rotates another way and then whip pans back. Like but it's like a 3-page scene. And the kids are so good. And they're so in it. They're like, why cut? Like, why cut? I mean, it's ballsy on a studio movie because you're supposed to always have coverage and, you know, all that stuff. So sometimes you do, sometimes you don't have time. Please be responsible for that, folks. Read your contracts. But then I did that before lunch. I was like, cool. Well, there's 3 pages done. What do we do now? Right, next. We're going to do that. And suddenly you start to catch up on yourself. And No Day was the same as No Day is. But like, it definitely on this film was there was, you know, one day you'd be like walking in, there's horses everywhere and people are showing you swords. And the next day, you know, you're deciding where to park a car on a street, you know, or you're in a church hall. It was strange. I still, I think at the cast and crew, some of the art department, and hats off to the art department of this film, because my God, they were, geniuses, came to me and went, okay, wow, like we get it. Like we went with it, but we're like kind of unsure. But like, okay, cool. But now we get it. And I'm like, maybe the visual deck didn't work. Maybe there needs to be an extra 20 pages there. But it's interesting that you still have to have faith in yourself and that vision of it to kind of follow that stuff through.
Like, it's a really important lesson that as much as you can communicate and try and ensure everyone understands exactly what you're doing and why, you are ultimately the only person who sees that whole thing in your head and has this really broad perspective. Hopefully your producers see and understand all of it as well. But yeah, you have to believe in what you set out to make, I think.
Yeah, and I think you have to have that kind of belief in yourself and that original vision. When I first read a script, I write down exactly how I felt, like straight away, like what excited me, why I want to do it, and it becomes this, and it's something I look back on. Funny enough, before we did this chat, I opened it up again and I read it back just to go like, oh yeah, I remember. Yeah, it's kind of a little, I don't know, like it's a kind of note to self really about you, and especially in those darker times of production where nothing's working, you're at lunch, and you're like, my God, and stuff, and you just read it and go, okay, I know what's important. I know a way through, because if I try and stay true to this thing that I wrote or this thing I feel, that's the path to follow. It's very easy to get distracted or be frankly pushed down a road that maybe works against your instincts for the story. And on this, I was very, maybe foolishly, maybe as a sense of insanity, but I just knew I needed to get them in this way because there was no other way. There was no other option for me but other to do it like this. And luckily, I had a crew that just kind of went with it and just did exactly what we all needed to do. And yeah, to create some of that crazy stuff in like 7 minutes, some of it.
That is a great tip. So thank you for sharing that. I would love to talk to you about your cast.
Yeah, please do.
About the process of casting, and particularly the kids maybe first, because as I said, I know you worked with Darcy in Prancer, so I would be curious about maybe how you came to cast her in that film. The process of finding the other cast members is something that interests me also, particularly because of the nature of the film. The kids, and Darcy in particular, carry a huge amount of this film on her shoulders and on their shoulders. And I know we never get to shoot kind of chronologically or linearly, but as you said, you don't even get to necessarily do full scenes because you have do or part 1 or part 2, part 3. And even for very seasoned performers, I think there is a particular stamina that you need and an ability to quickly recall, where was I emotionally when we shot that last week, or whatever the case may be. And they all did exceptional jobs, which is a testament to them and a testament to you, and I think the environment that they were all kind of working under. But I would love to just hear about the casting process, what you are looking for, and then how you go about creating an environment and a space where you can work with those young performers to facilitate the performances that they gave you.
Yeah, so I mean, Darcy is just, I don't know where she came from, but she's very special. And I discovered her, whilst doing Prancer. So I did a Christmas movie called Prancer Christmas Tale with James Cromwell and some amazing actors. But at the heart of that was, a 9-year-old, 8-year-old girl. And the process, you look at a lot of tapes and you meet a lot of young actors, and in casting, I am very hands-on. I'm not a director that sits behind a monitor and lets the casting director do anything, really. And the casting director I work with will be like nodding away, like, yeah, he doesn't let us do anything. Because I'm the one that has to connect with them. I'm the one that has to feel like I have some sort of connection, especially with kids, right? Especially, you've got not very long to form a bond or a trust, or to suss each other out, because they're sussing you out as much as you're sussing them out. It's kind of, and there are some kids that you really connect with. You find a common ground, or you find a sense of humor, or you find a way of working and communicating so quickly. And other kids, you just don't. Like, they're shy, or they're disconnected, or you're not quite, it just, so that's a lot of it, is trying to find that initial connection. And then, then the work begins of trying the scene out. This is in the audition room, trying the scene out, playing with different versions of it, and talking to them really about what they think about the scene and what they think about the character, and their ideas. So yeah, so we found Darcy, and she was phenomenal, in Prancer, toe to toe with James Cromwell and a real life reindeer, like in the snow in Romania during COVID, away from her family, away from, like, it was, we, until she's too cool for me, but we'll be forever friends, because we really bonded on that film, and her mum Sarah and everything. Like, they're wonderful. And there's this kind of, there's the director relationship, and then there's this kind of slightly strange or interesting kind of surrogate parenting kind of perspective. Like, you're always looking out for them, and you're wanting to make sure they're well and comfortable and safe, but beyond what you would do for an adult actor, because of course we do that anyway, but I think there's a responsibility to the young cast in that way, as well. And in something like Prancer, which is shot in Romania, and she only really had her mum and was missing her family, and also just the pressure of and as you say, the stamina of, like, every day, lots of lines, lots of dialogue, and staying on it all the time and stuff, is just remembering that they're still kids, and sometimes they just need a minute to go and see their mom and have a hug, and that's fine. Don't care how late we are, don't care what we need. Like, if a kid needs a hug from their parent, they can do it. Like, it's, it's just, that's just it. But so going into Robin, it was great because she, like, aged up, and I had Robin going up, and in my mind, like, I always was like, she'd be amazing. Like, she'd be so good at this film. And we already had a shorthand, we already had a trust. And also we also had a way, and, Sky loved her and was very excited, for her to be part of the movie. And, but what was great, it set a tone, for the other actors, and to cast to her. It would have been a much harder job if it was casting Robin and the other guys at the same time. Because it's like, okay, I love this Glenn, and I like this Robin, but I don't think they quite work together. So who do I, and it becomes quite complicated. So it was a bit of a blessing to have that as, like, who do I think is going to work with Darcy, both from a personality perspective and also from a balanced performance. Rob Kelly cast the film, and he's done some wonderful work with young actors and cast in the past. So he already had his finger on the pulse of who was good and stuff. So, we still had some quite, I saw a lot of tapes, and I do say to casting directors, I want to see everything, and they go, yeah, sure, this is everything, but I know there's still another 100 or 200 that I've still not seen. But I watch a lot of tapes because I don't want to worry about someone missing something or someone making a decision on someone, because maybe you're after a quality, you're after something that's something they can bring to it, something about their personality, their viewpoint, their choices. It might not necessarily be the choice that is on the page, but it's a really interesting choice on screen. And you need to be, I think, especially with young boys, you need to be open to that. You need to be open to absolutely what they want to bring. and it all starts in the auditions, right? It all starts that, because you may be meeting loads of kids, and my God, some very talented kids came through the doors for this film. Like, I was kind of spoiled for choice, really. You're doing this exercise with everyone, even if they're not the people that are going to get the role. But like in the room, you're asking their opinion. You're asking what they would do. You're asking and seeing how they respond to that. And if some people don't have ideas, okay, fine. Some people go, oh, actually, so do you know this thing in like this game, right? There's this thing that this character, and you suddenly start to see them bring, especially like Bruno, who absolutely owned Glenn and the Wizard and owned everything he was going to do and had so many ideas like every day of how, but you're giving them the agency to contribute, and also to be listened to. And I do listen, and it's not just active listening and trying to humor them. Like, I genuinely want them to bring themselves to it, because that's how you get genuine, child performances, I believe. It's not to say that kids can't be directed. Of course they can, and they need to be, of course, like any actor. But I think maybe the distinction comes when it's like, oh, I never work with children, is because I feel like people may think that they need to control a performance more, like they need to line read a performance more. They need to kind of tell the kid exactly what they need to do, because they don't trust the fact they know or understand what they're doing. And that's just silly. Like, especially these days, these kids have watched everything. They're probably the most cine literate generation like ever, right? They know and get this stuff. So they understand story. They understand where they're coming from. And if you're casting them in a way that means that they're bringing themselves to that and their ideas, then they have ownership, and then they feel welcome, and they feel supported, and they feel confident to do those things that make it feel spontaneous and make it feel like a real performance that maybe, adult actors or more experienced actors either do instinctively or do as part of the process. But there's a contract with that, right? I expect a lot from my young actors. I talked in the same way I do adults. I leaf out the Spielberg book, It's like, I absolutely don't belittle them or mollycoddle them or anything like that. I'm just like, they're my actors. And so too, they can have ideas. But with that, I say, comes this contract where they need to be secure and safe enough to understand when I say no, right? That they're not going to be hurt or offended by it. Like, and I very clearly had this conversation. I said, look, I want your ideas. I want you to tell me stuff. I want you to help me. Like, we're all in this together. But if I say no, or I don't need you to be upset or offended by that, I'm not saying it's not a good idea. I'm saying it's just not right for this moment. And the same I do with the 100 other people on this set that might come up with ideas, right? So if they are mature enough to understand that, then let's go. Let's work this. Let's make this happen. I suppose that's what has been the key to it, really, for me anyway. And in terms of the environment, I just try and make sure we're having a lot of fun. I make sure I leave my stresses at the door. I make sure that because they're so receptive and they're so... a lot of obviously actors are sensitive to the director, and crews are sensitive to the director, and everyone's kind of looking to the director of like, are we in the crap here? Or he's still having fun? Maybe we're not in the crap as we think we are, but in my head I'm on fire and want to, get in the car and drive away and never come back. But you try and present, a way that makes people feel calm, especially with kids, because they pick up everything. They hear everything. They're not filtered in that way. So you just got to be really careful in terms of the set and the type of crew you have and that kind of thing around them in order to have a fun environment for them to do the best work, I suppose.
It sounds very much like you give them all the same autonomy that you would give to your adult actors, and the same respect and care and attention.
Absolutely. Yeah. They're actors, Bruno, who played Glenn, and Gloria played Amaya, had never been on a set before. They'd never done a movie before. They didn't know, like a lot of the work beforehand was kind of explaining like blocking and marks and these kind of technical things that sometimes people take for granted. But then Darcy's wonderful at that. She sets a tone, right?
Yeah.
She's 13, but 12 shooting the movie. And like, she's the utmost professional, like totally allowed to have the giggles and have fun and stuff. But when I give her that little cue, you know, like you're number one on the call sheet, everyone's looking at you to set this tone. When there's a scene of like 40 kids and everyone's looking at you, she knows when to snap it and change it and then make people set up. Like, she's as much my number one on the call sheet at 12 as she would be at 70. You know, it's like that's the contract we have. Yeah, and it's just, I say it's the same with the grown-ups, really. That's we all, or I certainly try to figure out how every actor likes to be directed or work, you know, be worked with. You know, Naomie Harris, who's worked with some absolutely stunning, experienced directors on some massive movies, you know, over to someone that's never been on a set before. So it's trying to be the best for them in terms of the way you give direction or your attitude or, you know, support or whatever that needs to be as a director in that particular moment and that particular shot every day. Why do we do this again? I'm just.
Your guess is as good as well. But also a really important point you raise, like every performer is different and needs different things. So there isn't a kind of paint by numbers or one size fits all on how to help in that space. You mentioned Naomie Harris, and while you had phenomenal kids in the film, your adult casts are also spectacular. Naomie, as you mentioned, Gwendolyn Christie, you had Mark Williams. What was the process like, or how did it differ when it came to casting those performers and getting them to buy into this wild world of imagination that you were all going to just go and make for 6 weeks?
Yeah. Well, with these kind of guys, they're offers, aren't they? They're no one's auditioning. It's an offer, a script read, you know, a Zoom or a meeting to figure out whether we're on the same page and how it's going to be to work with each other, and you know, a lot of, you know, me proving to them and their agents and everything that they're in safe hands. And I love actors, absolutely adore them. Like a lot of my friends are actors. Like I love that whole process on set. You know, I mean, I love it all. I love the technical geekery of picking lenses, and I also love shooting a performance. Like, I feel like you've kind of got to love it all to make movies. Like, I never really understood this whole, like, she's an actor's director, but doesn't really do camera, or this is more a technical director and doesn't really look at the performance. I'm like, you're in the wrong job as far as I'm concerned. Like, you need to be as passionate about it all, because it's all the tools you need to make the film, right? Anyway, sorry, sidebarred. But yeah, it's conversation. Also, you know, I've got my stupid pitch deck they can look at. You know, I've got my feeling of what I hopefully want the film to be, the references, you know, how you pitch the, you know, like speaking to Naomie, for example, I originally went in going, oh, I'd love to do kind of prosthetics and really make her, because she transforms kind of vampire in this film, it's how the kids see her, and really go kind of sort of Nosferatu-esque kind of gross, you know, stuff. And she didn't want to do it. Like, she, like, not in a difficult way. She's like, look, like, she's done it before and it limits her performance, and she doesn't feel very comfortable with it. And it's very, you know, it's very difficult. But she'd done Venom and she'd done Pirates of the Caribbean. And I was like, well, I said, oh, well, like in Pirates, you know, she's like, there's no prosthetics involved in that character whatsoever. I'm like, really? Not even? They say, no, it's about physicality, it's about presence, it's about distortion, it's about the angle of the face, it's about all these tools that someone as amazing as Naomie is, and Gwendolyn, yeah, they do the same work of what is the physicality of this character and how, and for them, the fun, right? She's playing this kind of vicious businesswoman and a vampire, you know. You know, Gwendolyn Christie's playing this very kind of nervy recluse, hippie, and this like petrifying witch. Like, what fun for those actors to kind of come up with these two different, and then find the connective tissue between them, so they don't, so there's something for the kids to hang on that makes them transform into these characters, and that the subtlety of that. So we had this discussion. I was like, yeah, absolutely. Like, I'm not going to do anything. Like, even though I go in with an idea and like this, that, and the other, you listen and you sometimes negotiate, or you sometimes go, okay, cool, I trust you. This is what you want to do, and this is the thing, then let's do it. I'm like, but can we please have you wearing fangs? Like, yeah, of course I'm wearing fangs. I'm a vampire. And I now can't imagine what it would have been like if she'd sat in the chair for 6 hours, beforehand. And the same for Gwendolyn. Like, what a wonderful, glamorous, amazing looking woman she is in real life. To make her haggard and older than she is, and all this stuff like this, I'm like, what are we doing? But again, a lot of that was physicality and the right wig and a little bit of makeup and the right lighting and stuff to kind of create that character. So I feel that you go in with these ideas and these references, and if it's going to hurt the performance, which is actually really what matters and what counts, then I'm not going to push it. I'm just not going to push it. Whereas I might push for other things that are important to me. So that's the kind of conversations you might have with anyone really coming on board to set a tone for these kind of roles.
Yeah, I guess it's that you mentioned there, just as you were speaking, trust, and that's what collaboration is about. It's about trusting. I think other people have ideas that hopefully are even better than the ones we have.
Absolutely. I might come across the person that's like obsessively detailed and things like this, but like as soon as there's a better idea, I'm like, my God, let's do that. Like, absolutely, let's do that. I mean, having the editing, my editor is amazing, and I'd have an idea of, okay, maybe we do like a 4-frame dissolve to do this kind of cut between the two, or maybe we need a little flare and he'd go and you'd try it and go, okay, cool. And he'd say, well, what about this? I go, oh my God. I remember the first time I saw the film, and it's in the trailer, when Henry gets hit by the ball and it changes. I remember watching the assembly, and I was like, oh, great wipe cut. It felt like this great kind of wipe out from his face or something. So I went back and was like, oh, let's see the cut, and it was just a cut, just a straight cut, and your brain fills in everything you need it to do. And I never would have thought about doing it like that. I thought maybe we'd have to do something a bit more complicated. But actually the simplest thing was the best. And that's actually probably for the whole movie really, was the simplest thing was probably the better idea, essentially.
Yeah. I would love to get your sense on all the design departments and the design of the film. I think your makeup, production, costuming, what a spectacular job everyone did. And the answer to this may simply be what we have been talking about, and maybe the deck and the lookbook kind of that you build, and it may be just the collaboration. But I would love to hear about how you communicated your vision for the design of the film and the design of the kingdom, and what that process was like, because it's so very rich. And as we were talking about, full knight's armor for so many kids and essays, it just must have been again, given your schedule, a massive
yeah, I mean,
departments to achieve the level of ambition that ultimately ended up on screen.
Yeah, I mean, they're just wizards. I mean, I don't quite, makeup, costume, and obviously into art department, production design. I couldn't be happier, really. They were so in sync, and then maybe it's the deck is important and the conversations we had, but it was, and it's always negotiation as well, because this kind of armor doesn't exist for kids. Like there's a bit that you can get, but it's all adults. So you want to do an army of adults, you can go and get 1,000 costumes tomorrow, if you want to, off the shelf. Try and get it for kids, like, no. So a lot of it's handmade. You know, a lot of it is sourced from different things and bashed together and kind of kit bashed, you know, in ways. And it's being clever about the budget and the time, but also it's like, okay, because some of the armor, I mean, some of Henry's armor was from Game of Thrones, like it was from like some of the and from House of the Dragon, like some of those pieces have still got characters' name inside them, you know, and they're from places. So it was trying to find for them, it's trying to find out what exists, what we can customize, and what we have to buy, and also layering of like, okay, this first wave is metal and great, and that next wave in the background are like plastic or, you know, or that kind of more slightly more fancy dress, but sprayed and in a way that you don't quite tell, and trying to use those kind of techniques to help the budget, because you don't have the time to with all the budget to make everything from scratch. Like absolutely, as much as my deck had these aspirations of everyone having the same, you know, lion sword thing on there, you know, which didn't quite work. And you know, and into makeup and you know, the prosthetics, you know, the Rings of Power, or the Rings team came and did the orcs for us, of which I can only afford 2. Actually, they said I can only afford 1. So I was like, okay. And now I know. So I now make that character like the lead orc, like he's like the big bad, you know, the hench, you know, the one, the next in command from a story perspective of Naomie, and everyone else isn't. And then they are able to do a second one. So I was like, oh great, you got 2, and everyone else are like masks, you know, like shop bought masks, sprayed, trying to make them match. And again, it's blocking to try and make them blend so you don't notice, hopefully, the seams.
I did not notice the seams.
Good. That's good. I'm glad. Don't pause it too much. But yeah, the product design, you know, Sivo, the product designer who had never worked before, is probably as insane and as committed and passionate as I am. Like, I'd never met him. We went on a big walk in the woods when we first met, and we're just like big kids. Like, we're just going, oh, like, you know, climbing trees and doing this kind of stuff and talking about the film and how it meant to be kids and what that mean, and having a look around us and seeing other kids play in the woods and the forest and the playgrounds and that sort of thing. And we just hit it off. And he knew what I was trying to pull off. And I don't quite know how he did it on the budget. Like, genuinely, I don't know how he did it, because we built that entire kingdom and the walkways and obviously that throne room set. And, you know, the kingdom was on location, and the thought and planning is stuff that they really should be, that I'm so thankful for, is they put in the work and the maths in making sure that kids were allowed on the structure without being harnessed. And like, and you take it for granted all these times. It's like, of course, on rope bridges you run across. You know as well as I do, as soon as anyone gets on a step ladder, it's considered a stunt. So you can see how, like, at height, you know, those kids running and fighting along those bridges and things. But like, it's a trick of the eye. Like, they're not as high up as you think they are. It's designed in a way that the safety rails are built into the structure, so you don't necessarily see them. And there's a lot of thought and planning that's gone into making that work. And, you know, the structure of the tree, I mean, there's basically it's a private farm, and that was overgrown, some like up to my chest, you know, at places. And I was with Sivo trying to visualize what trees they had and where the throne room might be and the run of the bridge and all the science and design that goes behind building rope bridges that can hold weight over certain distances without having a wooden structure. Like, all this thought that goes into that thing, which is just genius, and I'll never understand. But they did it, and it's one of those sets that it was expensive to make, like in terms of time and manpower. When you look at in the script, you know, there were conversations about like, oh, are we shooting on this set enough for how much we've been spent? And I was like, I'm going to move as many scenes as I can, but I'm not suddenly going to make a movie that's just shot on rope bridges. Like, the scope and scale of the film comes across bigger than the budget we have, precisely because we don't overuse it. You know, like, it feels like we use it in the right way at the right time for the story. And even if there were conversations about because, you know, the design, everyone sort of designs the kingdom and thought, this is stunning, like, no way. And they're like, do we need the throne room? Let's get rid of the throne room. We shoot all on the bridges. It'd be great. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. We can't, if that may save you a few quid, but like, this film is about the crown and the throne and who sits on the throne and what that means and the iconography of the throne room. Like, from a story perspective, what are they fighting for? We don't have a central place. There's a reason why the throne in Game of Thrones is so iconic, because it's just the symbol of it's the symbol of power, it's symbol of everything. We did our version of that, and that was important for the audience to understand. And, you know, so there's battles that have to be fought there with production to make sure that, you know, to not just, as I say earlier, not just be led down a road in a way that just because it helps someone at any one time and it hurts the movie. That I'm feel like the most production friendly director. I'll always try and come up with a solution for something myself if I can, but then I'll also fight for the things that I think are truly worth fighting for. And I believe producers understand that I know which of those battles to fight and which to compromise on to help. And if I fight for something, it means I really care. You have to trust that I care. That's important for the script and the movie as a whole. And so I'm not just throwing strops and, you know, shouting about every single thing, because then it just becomes noise. You know, people are like, oh, he just wants everything. That's probably the thing they don't teach you in film school, or the thing you don't get from doing shorts yourself, that kind of thing, is looking at a budget and going, well, and a shot list and going, I can only afford 3.5 crane days. How do I maximize that time and make sure that works over the spread of the film? So, and all that stuff that, you know, I'm sure you've done a lot of, and that negotiation with blind producers. So yeah, I'm sure there was some battles that happened with costume. No doubt everyone needed more money, like instantly. And I wasn't in those conversations, but I'm sure every head of department went to production and went, we don't have enough money. Can we have some more? And probably smart production had it, but didn't give it originally. You know, it's like, it's that dance that happens because everyone always asks for more.
They're really important lessons to learn, and they can be really difficult ones to learn, you know, in terms of the right moments to push back and the moments not to, and what to fight for. Sometimes that may just come from trial and error, in my experience.
Yeah, and I don't feel like I get it right all the time. There's times on this film, there's shots where I'm like, I saved the Steadicam down this for this other shot, but you know what? I can see, or you end up doing 6 more takes because of a technical reason. You're like, oh, if I had the Steadicam today, I would have nailed this in 2. But I couldn't because of this. And so you make a judgment call, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Maybe the audience doesn't notice, but I notice. And the poor guy, you know, hand holding this camera that should be a Steadicam shot, and it being really difficult, definitely notices. So yeah.
What was if you had to pick one, the single biggest challenge of making Robin and the Hoods?
Pause for dramatic effect. A lot of time you read scripts, and part of the process of developing the script is to make it better, right? And you read a script like this that is so good already, your fear is you're just gonna break it. You know, your fear is that I hope my version of imagination matches up to other people's version of imagination, and people aren't disappointed by the finished product by going, oh, I thought it'd be a bit bigger, you know. Oh, I thought, like, you know, oh, and especially a script like this, which, you know, what is the limit of imagination? You know, if there's $100 million version of this movie, I know exactly how I would do it, and I know exactly where I would spend it, and probably still be like, hey, can we have some more money to? It's just that kind of movie that you could spend that kind of money on if you wished. So to have a film, you know, the studio sees rushes, and you know, you're kind of 2 weeks in and they start seeing the battle stuff, and they're like, holy moly, this looks big. Holy, like, we were expecting this, but we've got this. And And that's a huge compliment to me and the team and everyone trying it, that because that's what we're trying to deliver. But also there's a part of me going like, well, this was in the deck. This is what I promised, right, guys? Like, why is this a surprise? A little bit. But so yeah, I'm always so I think that's probably the hardest thing is how that then translates in. And boy, if I said time is the enemy always, and all the kind of facets that come with time in terms of the decisions you make and how you shoot it, and the hours with the kids, and not being able to use doubles, or needing to use doubles, or having to shoot something in singles because actually the other two actors have left the set already, and all that stuff, like which I think just starts to hurt the movie, when you get into those kind of things. So yeah, it's trying to maintain that kind of level that I feel the audience deserves, really, or expects, because they don't know how much it costs. They don't care. They just want to go on a ride, right? And anything that isn't up there, they see my little movie and see an Avengers movie the next second because they can, and it's hard to say it can't be different, but like, it needs to deliver on the promise. And if it doesn't, I've maybe not done my job properly, or maybe taken the wrong turn somewhere. Or maybe I'm overthinking it, but that's probably the hardest bit, I'd say, of this one.
I have to say, from my perspective, at the beginning of the film, you throw down the gauntlet and you open big, and I think you sustain and maintain and deliver on the opening of that film right the way through to the end. So
thank you. Yeah, that's the biggest fear is, you do this huge opening and everything else feels a bit small in comparison. It's a balancing act in scheduling, in directing, in the approach of it all. More so on this film than probably any other film I've ever done, really. Thinking about that balance was definitely a lot of kind of waking up at 2 a.m. What if I need to write that down, or what if that doesn't work, or how, just
I know that.
Yeah, we all have that feeling on everything we do, of course. But yeah, as for me, especially on this one, because I felt the audience, but also the writers, just deserved it. Like, I just didn't want to ruin what they'd made. Like, it was such a good script, and I didn't want to be the guy that ruined it. I really wanted to deliver on what they set up. And yeah, you want to do that in every film, but on this one especially, I just really wanted to try and capture a tiny bit of what that kind of power of imagination. And so hopefully we did.
I think you did. If you had a piece of advice for aspiring filmmakers, people entering the industry now who want to be directors, what would that piece of advice be?
I'm trying to give an answer that's not been said like a lot on this podcast and kind of other podcasts. I think you need to take a look at, like, a very hard look at yourself and understand and be willing for the hard road ahead, right? No one is a director overnight, and every day is a push, every day is a struggle, and every day, even the people that you think have made it and are doing well or stuff like this, it's like everyone's still pushing hard to stay working in this crazy industry. So I think it does have to be a real passion. Like, you really have to kind of live, breathe, think it. Like, this is, you have to be all in, or it's very difficult to go on the ride, I think. That's to say, it shouldn't be sacrifice your relationships and your family and your well-being mentally. And I go, hey, I fully admitted that it all got too much for me and I stopped, and that was important to me. I think also I'd say is that all the directors and other filmmakers aren't the enemy. Like, yes, it's a competitive industry, but And I've been there, right? I've been that guy early on that like is like, why is he doing that? Why is she doing that? Why am I doing that? And it's just not a good mindset to be in. And the more you start to open up and talk to other filmmakers and find your tribe, as it were, and even though you're contemporaries and stuff, and you help each other, the more that gets done, and the better that you become, you know, as a person, but also as a filmmaker. And that's not new information. If you look at like Spielberg and that whole original Rat Pack and those guys watching the cuts of their other movies, and Lucas and, you know, Coppola and that whole thing, like they all shared their stuff, right? They're all kind of trying to help each other get going. So as competitive as it is, you are you, and you are the person that, I'm going to use that voice thing again. What have you done to me, Jason? But like your unique viewpoint, don't try and second guess the thing that you think that person wants, right? What you bring to it, and that instinct is what people are hopefully looking for. And it's okay for that to be, inverted commas, wrong. It's okay for that not to land sometimes. But if you're true to yourself, and I feel like for me, when I've been truest or most honest about what I'm making, it's probably resulted in the best stuff, I think. I feel like I've given 3 different answers and not quite landed one. Was that useful?
Very useful. The one part I would like to extract is that mention of voice, and maybe we can change that language and we call it perspective, because something I do believe is that when you get to a certain stage of your career in this industry, let's say as a director, when you are going for jobs, if you're in a room and you're pitching, people know you can do the job, and the thing that people are interested in is your, not voice, your perspective.
Your perspective, your take, yeah.
Your individual experience and interpretation is the only currency you have. That
absolutely. That's why comparing yourself to others is kind of silly in that way, because no one's made the films you have, and no one's trying to make the films you have, and no one, like, yes, it's competitive, and yes, there's jealousy, and yes, there's passion because everyone loves what they're doing and wants the opportunities and stuff, but no one can copy that true thing that you want to bring to something. And that's, I feel, what producers and people are looking for, that kind of infectious passion and commitment to that perspective, I suppose. And you don't win them all. Absolutely, you don't win them all. But that's what I was saying about you have to have that drive and commitment to it, and know that you love it in order to, you know, survive being dumped and brokenhearted a lot, of which we've all had it. We've all had it. But hopefully that cliche makes us stronger. But it does. It develops the thicker skin, I suppose. And just know that, like, you're not alone in rejection. That's probably the thing that unifies us the most.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So it's good to find your contemporaries and share the highs and also the lows. I love sitting down and like watching my mates' movies that they've just shot, or they've got assembling, like, oh, Phil, give an opinion, or, you know, because I'm so proud of them for like getting there, you know, and making it, and then also trying to be able to help. Like, it's so good. And I'm Robin the Hoods. I showed just so many of my friends in the edit room just to test and try, and like, and some ideas in the film and some pace ideas. So I've all come down to those conversations with people, and they've made me look better than I am for that. And because we all grow through that. And I think that's super important, is not to be so close-minded about it all. It's okay to share, and it's okay to get it wrong. Absolutely.
I love it. And I couldn't agree more. My last question then is, what is next? I know the film isn't even out yet. It's out in 9 days' time on Sky Cinema. I can't wait for people to see it, and for you to start to see the reaction of audiences and families when they do get to watch it. But Can you talk about what's next? Are you taking a bit of time out? Are you developing? Are you on to another film? What can you tell us?
Well, I took a bit of time actually because I made Prancer and Robin pretty much back to back, and I've got young kids, and I missed last summer, and I missed the summer before, and and I want to be home, and this film allowed me to do that for a bit and not kind of have to jump straight back into commercials and all that sort of side of it. But it's helped me have the time to write and also read and things coming in and reflect on maybe what might be next and how, if it is positively received and people like it, but how I can maybe use that to get something over the line that was maybe not possible before that. My new motto is kind of, it's all bullshit till it's real, there's some stuff I am excited about, and there's some really lovely stuff that's coming my way, but different levels of finance, different levels of cast, and there's this. So, and the film's not out yet, right? So I'm excited for people to see it, and who knows what's next for me. Like, it's exciting to see maybe what's next, but again, I'm not expecting just the phone to ring. I never expect that. I never expect that someone's just gonna pick up the phone and go, "Hey, here's some money." Like, there's a bunch of stuff I'm writing and throwing my sleeves up and developing, so I can hopefully push that stuff forward. When this stuff comes out, if it's positively received.
Well, I can't wait to see what you do next, one way or another. And when you do.
Thank you,
Phil Hawkins. I just want to say thank you again for spending all this time with me. I've kept you long past the 2 hours we had booked in, so we're pretty.
Well, hopefully people are still listening. They should have a gold star or a stiff drink. I don't know what. Hopefully it was hopefully useful.
Very much so. And that's a wrap on Phil Hawkins. Thank you for listening to the Filmmaker's Playbook. If you're enjoying the show, please follow and rate us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you have feedback, questions, or topics that you'd like me to cover on the show, please put them in the comments section on our Instagram page, at the Filmmaker's Playbook Podcast. You can follow me on Instagram at Jason Branagan Director, and you can follow Phil at Film Blog. Links and social media handles are in the show notes, including links to Star Wars Origins and Phil's YouTube channel. Join me next week when I talk to director Daniel O'Hara. Until next time.